still working? Yeah. Perfect. Thanks for the intro and the welcome, because I have to say that the thought of following up the two previous talks is horrifying. But as James mentioned, I'm Ricardo Mendez. I'm been all over the place, actually. I'm originally from Costa Rica, spent some time, like 7 years in Romania, Hong Kong, other places. Now I'm actually based in Berlin. And I'm going to be talking about curry, partially. First of all, the biases, because experience kind of shapes the way we think, and these are mine. I'm a software engineer by training, so you'll see that I may have taken some of the topic a little bit literally. A lot of what I've been doing for the past few decades is running teams. And as part of this, since I'm running a consultancy, I've ended up working with 2 to 3 teams a year, which means that I've had the opportunity of seeing things across the entire spectrum. From teams where they say that they really excel about it, they really like craftsmanship, but they don't really do nothing about it, to teams where it's not even a topic, but they really excel at it. And the thing that I found is that if you ask people about craftsmanship, everybody's going to say, like, yep, sure, we love it, absolutely. But then there's this dissonance where they think that it's a good thing, but either they can't even define it, or if they define it, it's usually some high and lofty artistry-focused definition. And I'm not entirely sure where this comes from, but I suspect that it comes because nobody likes to think that they're this assembly line piece that some soulless plutocrat hasn't yet figured out how to replace and automate, and saying that what you do is a craft kind of sounds like a good way of not getting machine turked or outsourced to whatever is the current destination. Now, the thing is, often we just don't reach for the possibilities of craft in the rush to get the job done. We hit a minor snag on the process, and all these noble but fuzzy ideas that people had about what craft was go out the window because, well, that's nice, but now I have a job to do, right? And in fact, if you look up definitions of craftsmanship, a lot of them are about doing things by hand, or about tradition, or about, skill or quality, which is, as far as I'm concerned, it's useless. Of course we care about quality, but this doesn't tell us how to go about that. And it's also somewhat highfalutin. And all these high expectations associated with a craft, I think, is what keeps most people from doing small things that can really make their work better in the long run. So let me tell you my definition. My definition of a craft, it's fairly straightforward. It's about consistently avoiding taking shortcuts, even when these shortcuts could seem practical for other people, just because you expect that you're going to get better results. Now, let me tell you a story, and then I'm going to talk about some things that I found on it that make craftsmanship easier to sustain within a team. I'm curious, who knows what this is? Well, good thing I didn't write that talk. So, this is the Comiket in Tokyo. It's a group basically happens twice a year, and a lot of doujinshi authors, which are basically independent comic creators, just get together and publish and talk about their stuff. And a few years ago, my wife and I were here with her twin sister in Tokyo because for the winter Comiket, we go for the Comiket often because, of course, we're gigantic nerds. And hi, honey. And the thing is, when we're traveling, we usually walk easily 20 kilometers a day. We just get out and walk, so we build up quite an appetite. And this particular day, we didn't have any breakfast because we wanted to go to this sushi place in Tsukiji Fish Market, Daiwa. And by the time that we got there, it had a 5-hour queue. That's not the restaurant queue, but it pretty much looked like it. So what we did actually was that we went straight to this park that we wanted to visit and spent a good chunk of the day there just walking around, looking at different things. And by 4 in the afternoon, when we hit Shinjuku Station, we haven't had any food. Like, we haven't had anything but matcha all day, and we're absolutely starving. Now, the good thing about subway stations is that there's lots of little quick lunch places in there. And these are really bare bones, but really efficient. I mean, these are like basically a hole in the wall. It's slightly above the stationary food cart level. And some of these are so streamlined that they don't even have anybody to take your money. What they have is something like this, which is basically a vending machine where you come in and you figure out what you want. And if, like us, you don't speak Japanese, then you have to have the kanji for whatever you want, and you do some pattern matching with the kanji and the buttons, and you figure out where the squiggle is going, and maybe narrow it down by price. And you put in your money, and this spits out a ticket. And you get your ticket, you go inside, you hand your ticket to someone, and then eventually you get your food and you eat and you leave. This is how impersonal this feels. I mean, you can go through your entire week having lunch at these places without having to say hi to a single human being. But the thing is, as we're walking by, these places have they do this thing where they have the wax models of food on the window. And we're walking by and we're hungry, and one of these things catches our eye. We're actually wanting to go someplace else. And one of these things catches our eye, and it is this plate right here, which luckily I have a zoomed in photo. And this thing is basically a calorie monster. It's like breaded pork and this minced pork patty here and sausages, and there's like some potato salad thing in the center, and croquette, which is this deep-fried potato croquette that my wife loves, and some corn, and this is all floating in a bit of curry. And our mouths just start watering, like, okay, we have to eat. And we figure, it's not gonna look like that, not for 800 yen, which was on top of that like the expensive dish. This was like 7 euros, I think, back then, maybe less. But who cares, we're hungry. We just get our ticket, we go in, we hand it in, and we sit at the bar with our tea while we're waiting for the food to come out. And the thing is, we can see right into the kitchen, where there's this young guy who puts the plates and starts putting things in, starts moving them around with this Franciscan patience, and we're hungry, so we're just staring daggers into this guy, hoping he'll hurry the hell up so that we can eat. And eventually he goes out, and the food comes out, and we get our plate, and it's perfectly arranged, and it's this delicious, mouth-watering work of art. Or at least it felt that way. I mean, we were really hungry. Like, truth be told, I don't even remember what this thing tasted like. We've had some really great meals on that trip. This was probably just grease, and we just wolfed it down. But what I remember is that how much it impressed me that this looked exactly like the model on the window. And this kind of made a light bulb go on, because you see, it looked like for a while there, you couldn't walk into a talk about craftsmanship without running into this guy. Who knows who this is? Show of hands. Okay, so this is from Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is a great documentary. And it is about this gentleman who everybody extols as the epitome of craftsmanship, who is a sushi chef. He's been making sushi for, I don't know, maybe 60, 70 years by now. And apparently his stuff is so good that he got a 3 Michelin star rating, which, as far as the Michelin guide is concerned, it is reason enough to travel to that country just to eat there. So, you have to make reservations months in advance before you visit. And, that's really nice, and I'm very happy for Jiro. But the thing is, this might as well be the survivor bias of craftsmanship. This is about someone who devoted himself to a single style of cuisine for decades and eventually got worldwide recognition. That's nice, right? I mean, everybody dreams of doing their best work at the equivalent of a 3-star Michelin place. But I don't really care about that. First of all, that's an end state. It's not a process. And I don't care about how people work when they land their ideal gig on the best possible place. To me, it's a lot more relevant how to act if where you're working at is on the unglamorous end of the spectrum. How can you sustain a level of craft when where you're working on can feel like the equivalent of a hole-in-the-wall sushi curry station joint? And this reminded me of something that David Cronenberg said, because, of course, I'm also a movie nerd. And this thing really stuck with me, because what happens with crafts or with anything is that people see the end result. And we expect that whenever we put something out, this is what we have to do. We expect to come out with the perfect work of art, or at least close enough to some imaginary standard right out the door. We may intellectually know that this is not possible, but we don't really think about setting things up so that we can improve incrementally. So let's talk a bit about what I've found with my teams that we can do to help sustain a certain level of craftsmanship without expecting to be the 3-star Michelin restaurant right out of the start. And the first thing, and this is a huge one, is that you need to find allies who share your aesthetics. And yep, I'm a programmer and I'm talking about aesthetics. Because in order to do something in the long run and to enjoy doing it, you have got to like what you're building. Everybody can tolerate doing something ugly, but only for a while. Crunch time, shoddy processes, unnecessary fires, these things are tolerable, but they cause ugly results. And there's really no way to build something to last, because ugliness leads to churn. If you think about it, even the language that we use to describe something that resonates with us, a solution that feels just right, is about beauty. And no matter if you're a Mac or Windows or Linux user, I don't think I need to sell you on the fact that aesthetic choices affect platform and system design. Working with people who share your aesthetics is going to make it a lot easier to agree on what it is that you're building in the first place. And you need to keep in mind that allies are not just co-workers. They can be, or these are not people on your immediate team. They can be people in the company who help you sell your approach. They can be a mentor whose questions help you find your own style. They can be just somebody from the community who gives you an opinion or an opportunity. Because we all need people who support us when we're unsure about a decision, to tell us when we're about to make a boneheaded move, or who just at the very least have different blind spots. People whose judgment we can trust. And something that I've found is that trust plays a gigantic part on this. And when team members trust someone's aesthetic choices for a system, even if they wouldn't ever define it that way, they're a lot more likely to trust this person's choices. Moreover, shared aesthetics are going to make jamming a lot easier. Because there's this meme that a team is like a finely tuned orchestra. And it's not, actually. An orchestra kind of has it easy, because orchestras and bands, they have a score to play. Somebody composed this thing in advance. This score is going to play pretty much the same every time, barring some stylistic choices by the conductor. And in fact, when you're in a band, a lot of your work is just about doing your bit. You practice, and you show up, and you do your bit, and you hope that everybody else's timing is right, but you don't really need to bring a lot of yourself into it. And I actually learned that while coasting as playing the saxophone in a symphonic band, because I've had a really weird career. Now, software development is not like this. Software development is a lot more like a jazz jamming session. Yeah, the members show up, and they have a basic set of skills, but they're not going to apply them consistently in the same manner in every session. All too often, you're going to need to improvise. And for this improvisation to work, you need to know your fellow players, and you need to trust them. You need to trust them to take over whatever it was that you were just playing. Sometimes somebody in your group is going to fumble, and you're going to need to pick up and make sure that whatever bomb they phrase plays well into the whole thing. Sometimes they're going to need to do the same thing for you. And not everybody can be in the front going nuts with a solo the entire time. And enjoying the aesthetics of what you're creating is going to make even a supporting role rewarding. It helps increase the willingness to put aside the individual's own temporary showboating interests, just to ensure that whatever you're building is better in the end. And when choosing members for your band to jam with, you need to keep in mind that diversity is going to play a big part in coming up with interesting aesthetics. You don't want a band that's 95% tubas or trombones, right? And if you're running a team, you're not a conductor, you're a stagehand, you're a roadie. You need to forget this Steve Jobs movie bullshit of musicians play the instruments, I play the orchestra. That's absolute rubbish. It's not your band. If you're running a team, they don't work for you, you work for them. Now, of course, I said that it's about avoiding shortcuts. And shortcuts are tempting, and when under pressure, we're going to want to take them. So giving all this jamming and improvisation and free-flowing, we need to do one key thing. We need to put ourselves in a situation where doing the right thing is the easier choice. We need to build habits so that things become autonomic, as if you put on your seatbelt before you even turn on the car. Now, you're going to need to figure out which things work for your case. And there are going to be things that are probably going to be a bit out of the usual procedures, like having a weekly WTF session where everybody sits around and discusses, well, this is how we screwed up this week, and this is why we're not going to do it again. Or you can just give everybody Friday's afternoon off to just learn and experiment, no matter if you're against the deadline. You need to repeat these things, and you need to train just to build habit, because that way, if you ever hit crunch time, you can default to best practices. Because I saw this line a few weeks ago about, best practices start with good people, and that absolutely misses the point of best practices. Like, best practices don't care about if you're good or bad. They're there to support you even when you're not at your best, when you slept too little and have a terrible cold and your brain just refuses to come on. And allies are also going to be part of the support structure. They're there to raise a finger and go, ein Moment bitte, when you're going to do something lazy and ugly that is going to bite you all in the end. Because the thing is, you're going to have to live with your choices. So you're going to need a tolerance for past mistakes. And I still code. And I assure you that that line about how there's no code more ugly than the one that you wrote 6 months ago is 100% true. And worse, while you're learning, this thing is never going to go away. So you're going to need to get better at tolerating, cringing at your past work. This is also another point where the right allies can help. They can help give you perspective if they have more experience than yourself. And two, they can challenge you when you're hesitant to try something that you feel you might fail at. Because there can be no growth without exertion. And yes, you will exert yourself. Getting better at anything is tiring. It's going to be a constant fight against your own desire to give up, which is why you need to set things up so that it's easier for you and your team to do the best thing in the situation. But this is also why you need to pick the right allies to work with, because you're going to have enough stress as it is. And the wrong people are going to turn your entire day into table flipping o'clock. Now, craftsmanship is about shaping the end result. Being able to shape requires a measure of agency, the capacity to act and determine your own fate. Now, I expect most people here are not self-employed, so in that case, what you need to do is find a place where people see the value that you provide. Because agency will require some negotiation, and there really can be no negotiation if the other side sees you as a cog, because at best, you're going to be arguing about replacement costs. Now, don't misunderstand what I said about aesthetics. I don't really think craftsmanship is just about artistry or just about creating something for creation's sake. It's a lot more about consistency and putting in the work. You and your team getting your heads down and focusing on what you need to achieve, no matter where you're in the organization. Remember that the guy arranging these plates day in and day out so that they look exactly like the model on the window is the cook at a hole-in-the-wall place. This is not the chief curry officer imposing his glorious craft vision from up on high in the company. This is just somebody who's getting on with the job. And still, with all the structure, you can't let the madness get lost in the method. You're going to need to bring something from yourself, because it's easy to just follow existing frameworks, a set of rules that somebody else came up with without questioning if they apply to you. The end result is going to be dull. It's going to be the same thing as everybody else is doing. Because frameworks are training wheels for the mind. They're useful when you're getting started or as a reference point, but can be constraining. So we need to keep asking ourselves if hewing closely to the framework buys us something and where we would be better off by just stepping away. because frameworks are other people's choices. And it pays to examine if we're also happy with other people's trade-offs. Now, maybe notice that this advice on potentially disregarding frameworks might be at odds with what I said about best practices. So if so, good, because you're going to need a certain disregard for authority. It doesn't matter if people are criticizing or providing advice or praising. You need to make sure that whatever they're telling you is in line with your aesthetics before you apply it. Because remember that whatever experience they are, whatever experience they have or whomever they aren't you. And that obviously includes me. So, thank you.